Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Okay, let's dive in. When you hear jaundice, yellowing of the skin and eyes, you probably think liver problems.
Yeah, almost automatically. It's like a signal that something's not right. Maybe a buildup of, well, waste.
That's certainly the usual understanding. Bilirubin, the yellow pigment causing it, it's typically seen as a sign of pathology, isn't it? Something the liver should be clearing out.
Right, because that's the liver's job, essentially processing it for removal.
But here's the twist, and it's a really interesting one. What if that buildup, that yellowing, isn't just a symptom in some cases? What if it's actually the body fighting back?
Fighting back against malaria, specifically.
Exactly. That's the really surprising idea from some new research we're looking at today. This pigment, bilirubin, might actually be protective against severe malaria.
It's a fascinating turn. We're digging into a paper from the journal Science, and there's a helpful news article summarizing it too.
And this is a big collaboration, right? Johns Hopkins Medicine, the Gulbenkian Institute in Portugal, plus folks in Germany and Gabon, lots of expertise coming together.
Definitely. So our goal here is to really unpack this.
Yeah.
What did they find about bilirubin's role? How does it actually combat the malaria parasite? And what could this mean going forward?
Okay, let's start right at the beginning then. Bilirubin, what is it exactly and why does it build up?
So bilirubin is this natural yellow pigment. Your body produces it when it breaks down heme.
From hemoglobin in red blood cells.
Precisely. Hemoglobin carries oxygen in your red blood cells, and when those cells get old or damaged, they're broken down, heme gets released, and the body converts that heme into bilirubin.
And this is just a normal process happening all the time.
Yeah, constantly. It's part of recycling. Now, the thing about bilirubin is it's lipophilic fat soluble. It doesn't dissolve well in water on its own.
So it needs help getting out of the body.
Exactly. To excrete it, mainly via bile, and then, eventually in your stool, the liver has to make it water soluble.
How does the liver manage that?
It uses a process called conjugation. There's a specific liver enzyme. It's called UDP glucuronidyltransferase family 1 member A1.
Okay, quite a mouthful.
Let's just say the conjugation enzyme. It attaches another molecule, glucuronic acid, to the bilirubin. That makes it water-soluble, ready to go.
And the bilirubin before that happens?
That's called unconjugated bilirubin. And it's when that form, the unprocessed kind, builds up in your blood plasma, that's what causes the yellow color of jaundice.
Got it. So bilirubin from old red blood cells needs liver processing for removal. Now, malaria, how does that fit in?
Well, malaria is caused by Plasmodium parasites, and they famously invade and multiply inside red blood cells.
Which destroys the cells, right?
Exactly. That destruction is called hemolysis. And when lots of red blood cells break down quickly, you get a massive release of hemoglobin and consequently hemine.
So lots more heme floating around than usual.
Yes, and some of that free heme, called labile heme, can actually be toxic. It's a risk factor itself in severe malaria. The body tries to deal with this toxic heme. An enzyme called heme oxygenase 1 breaks it down into biliverdin.
Which is another pigment.
Yes, it's greenish. Then another enzyme, biliverdin reductase A, converts that biliverdin into bilirubin.
So malaria causes red blood cell destruction, releasing heme, and the body's response pathway actually produces more bilirubin to handle the heme breakdown products.
Precisely. And doctors have known for ages that jaundice is common in malaria. So the big question was, is the jaundice just a sign the liver is struggling under the strain of the infection? Or could it be something else?
Could it be protective? A deliberate response?
That's the alternative hypothesis, a really counterintuitive one, given how we usually think about jaundice.
So how did this research team tackle this question? You mentioned the collaboration.
Right, it was key. They brought together different strengths. Dr. Bindu Paul's group at Hopkins, for instance, had already done really interesting work showing bilirubin could protect brain cells from oxidative stress. They'd even developed better ways to measure bilirubin.
Okay, so expertise on bilirubin's potentially good side.
And then Dr. Miguel Soares' lab in Portugal are experts on the body's defense mechanisms, specifically in malaria. So they pool that knowledge.
Makes sense. What was their approach? How did they test this?
They came at it from several angles. First, they looked at humans. They got blood samples from 42 malaria patients in Gabon, all infected with Plasmodium falciparum, the most dangerous type.
Real-world data first.
Yep. Then they used mouse models. They compared normal mice with mice they'd genetically engineered to lack that enzyme, biliverdin reductase A.
The enzyme that makes bilirubin.
Exactly. So these mice couldn't make much bilirubin. They infected both types of mice with a rodent form of malaria.
To see if the ability to make bilirubin mattered.
Right. And they also did a crucial follow-up. They gave bilirubin to the mice that couldn't make it to see if adding it back helped them fight the infection.
Right, they're very direct.
And finally, they did a lot of detailed work, both in the mice and in lab dishes in vitro, to figure out the how, the mechanism by which bilirubin might actually be working against the parasite.
Okay, so let's get to the findings. What did the human blood samples show?
This was really the first big clue. Using those advanced measurement techniques, they found something striking. The patients who had asymptomatic malaria infected, but with few or no symptoms, they had significantly higher levels of unconjugated bilirubin.
The unprocessed kind. Higher than who?
Higher than the patients who had symptomatic malaria.
How much higher are we talking?
On average, about 10 times more unconjugated bilirubin in the asymptomatic group.
Wow, 10 times. That's a strong correlation.
It really is. It strongly suggested that having more of this specific type of bilirubin was linked to a milder form of the disease in humans.
Okay, correlation in people. What about the mice? Did the experiments back this up?
They absolutely did. It provided the causal link. When they infected the normal mice, the ones that could make bilirubin, those mice showed a big jump in their unconjugated bilirubin levels, just like the asymptomatic humans.
And did they survive?
Yes, crucially, all of those normal mice survived the malaria infection.
And the mice that couldn't make bilirubin, the ones lacking the enzyme.
A totally different story. In those mice, the parasite just ran rampant. They couldn't control it. And unfortunately, every single one of those mice died from the infection.
That's pretty stark evidence. The ability to produce bilirubin seemed critical for survival in that model.
It really did. And then came the clincher experiment, giving bilirubin back to those deficient mice.
What happened then?
When they gave bilirubin supplements to the mice that couldn't make their own, after they were infected, it worked. Giving them bilirubin significantly improved their survival times, bringing them much closer to the survival rates of the normal mice.
So it really was the bilirubin itself providing the protection.
That's what this experiment strongly indicates. It wasn't just some other side effect of the enzyme being present, it was the bilirubin molecule having a direct protective effect.
And did they confirm it was specifically the unconjugated form, the one that causes jaundice?
Yes, they checked that too, with another clever experiment. They used mice engineered to have reduced activity of that liver enzyme UDP glucuronidyltransferase family 1 member, A1, the one that normally conjugates bilirubin to make it water-soluble.
So these mice would naturally build up unconjugated bilirubin, right? They'd be prone to jaundice.
Exactly. And if the hypothesis was correct, that accumulating unconjugated bilirubin is the protective strategy, then these mice should also resist malaria better.
And did they?
They did. Inhibiting bilirubin conjugation in the liver also protected the mice from severe malaria. This really cemented the idea that it's the buildup of the unconjugated form, the very thing causing jaundice, that represents the body's defensive move.
That's amazing. The symptom is the defense, in a way. So how does this yellow pigment actually fight the parasite? What's the mechanism?
Yeah, this is the really cool part. The research showed that unconjugated bilirubin gets inside the infected red blood cell and goes after the Plasmodium parasite directly. It seems to launch a multi-pronged attack.
Okay, like what?
Well, first, it messes with the parasite's mitochondria.
They're energy factories.
Right. It specifically seems to suppress the production of something called pyrimidines. The parasite needs pyrimidines to build DNA and RNA, basically to replicate itself. So bilirubin hinders its ability to multiply.
Slows down reproduction. What else?
It also targets the parasite's food vacuole. This is where the parasite digests the red blood cell's hemoglobin to get nutrients.
Okay.
When it digests hemoglobin, it releases heme, which remember is toxic even to the parasite. The parasite normally protects itself by converting this toxic heme into harmless crystals called hemozoin.
A detoxification process for the parasite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But unconjugated bilirubin steps in and inhibits that crystallization process.
So the parasite poisons itself with its own waste.
It makes it harder for it to deal with the toxic heme. Yes.
Yeah.
And by disrupting this food vacuole function, bilirubin also seems to limit the parasite's access to essential amino acids it gets from digesting hemoglobin.
Wow. So it disrupts energy, messes with replication, prevents waste disposal, and limits nutrients. That's quite an arsenal for something we thought was just waste.
It really is a sophisticated attack. It fundamentally changes how we should view bilirubin, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Dr. Bindu Paul had a great quote about this, didn't she?
Yeah, she said something like, bilirubin was often just seen as a waste product, but this work affirms that it could be one critical protective measure against infectious disease. It really forces a rethink.
So, thinking about the future, could this actually lead to new malaria treatments?
That's the big hope, I think. The findings strongly suggest that unconjugated bilirubin, or maybe drugs that mimic it, or perhaps ways to safely boost its levels in the body, could be a new therapeutic avenue.
Targeting this natural defense pathway.
Right, developing ways to help protect people from the really severe, deadly forms of malaria.
And the researchers seem to think this isn't just a random fluke, but maybe an evolved defense?
Yes, that's their interpretation. They propose that this whole response, boosting bilirubin production and slowing down its removal when faced with Plasmodium, is likely an evolutionarily conserved mechanism, a strategy honed over time to fight malaria.
So jaundice, in this context, is like a visible sign of the body deploying this ancient weapon.
Kind of, yeah. A metabolic defense strategy that limits how bad the malaria gets.
And could it work against other things too, not just malaria?
That's a possibility they raise. Given how it works, perhaps bilirubin could offer some protection against other infectious diseases. And thinking back to Dr. Paul's earlier work on brain cells.
Protecting against oxidative stress.
Exactly. They speculate there might even be links to protection against some neurodegenerative conditions, though that's more preliminary. But it definitely broadens the potential importance of bilirubin way beyond just liver health.
It seems almost too good to be true, though. Is there a catch? Any downside to this defense?
Well, biology is rarely simple. There are always trade-offs. The science paper points out a really significant one related to this strategy.
Which is?
Neonatal jaundice. While high unconjugated bilirubin might protect adults from malaria, in newborns, their blood-brain barrier isn't fully developed. Very high levels of unconjugated bilirubin can cross into the brain and cause potentially severe neurological damage.
Oh, wow. So the very mechanism that protects against malaria poses a serious risk to infants. That's a tough evolutionary balancing act.
It really highlights the complexity. A defense against one major threat creates a vulnerability at a different life stage.
And even with the therapeutic potential, it sounds like there's still work to do.
Oh, definitely. The researchers are quite clear about that.
Yeah.
While these findings open exciting new doors, figuring out how to safely and effectively harness this therapeutically to really combat the huge global burden of malaria,
Yeah.
well, that remains to be established.
So a major discovery, a potential new direction, but translating it into practical treatments needs more research.
Exactly. It's a fantastic start, a paradigm shift maybe, but the journey to new therapies is still ongoing.
Still, this whole deep dive has really turned the common understanding of jaundice and bilirubin upside down. This yellow pigment, often seen as just a sign of sickness.
Might actually be a crucial part of our defense toolkit, actively fighting parasites from inside our own cells.
It certainly challenges us to maybe look differently at other things our bodies produce, things we might currently dismiss.
Yeah, not just seeing symptoms as problems, but maybe sometimes as signals of complex adaptive responses at work.
Which really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? If bilirubin, this supposed waste product, has this hidden protective superpower, what other molecules or processes in our bodies, things we currently label as just byproducts or signs of disease, might actually be playing secret beneficial roles we haven't even discovered yet?
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.